The single greatest story maybe ever told by an NBA head coach. Plus a lot of other stuff. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is the April 10th edition of Locked on Jazz. We will hear the greatest story ever told by a head coach. You decide whether it is or not. Look back at Team 49 and give some accolades. Year one of the championship quest is over. Chris Dunn, was it real? What has Rudy Gobert done in Minnesota? And we will play the lottery as the 9th pick, set in our positions, but hoping Minnesota could keep losing at some point to get us in better positions. That's all coming up on today's show. It is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, even in the offseason. Every Monday through Friday, we're bringing you 30 minutes on your favorite team, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free and available on every podcast platform as well as on YouTube. So subscribe, hit the little bell button so you're notified when we're there. Join the group for the offseason, have other Jazz fans to chat with in the YouTube world. Thanks so much for being a part of it. Hopefully we make it worth your while. I am David Locke, the radio voice of the Utah Jazz and Jazz NBA insider. And that's where we start. All right, so I asked Will Hardy if he had a moment that was a thing that will forever symbolize, be memorable about his first season in the NBA, and out of nowhere, he dropped this story.
Ooh, the symbol. I don't know if it's the symbol, but when we beat Golden State at home in that chaotic game at the end where we stole it twice and Fontecchio got the dunk at the end, I actually had a friend who was in town who was a Warriors fan. He was there with his boss from San Francisco and a couple people from work. They were there for something, and they were sitting like 6 rows away from the bench. And so we won. The arena's going crazy. And on the walk out towards the tunnel, they're sitting right there, and I yelled something at him in the stands. And he got rushed by security because they thought that he had said something to me because of what's happened in the league lately. So I got in the back, and we went and talked to the team, and then our security guy came up to me and said, "Hey, don't worry, we got the guy. He's in the back. We're going over the film. He's going to be banned from the arena. Don't worry about it. We're going to figure out what he said to you." And I was like, "Huh?" And they said, "Yeah, no, the guy that you yelled at in the crowd." I was like, "Oh, no. That's a friend of mine." That was all me. So you forget that when you're the head coach, I guess your words have more weight than you're used to. So yeah, I almost got a friend of mine banned from the arena forever and arrested. So I'll remember that one forever for sure. Yeah, I don't interact with the fans anymore.
Kind of who Will Hardy is. And the slogan of his whole year has been, fun is underrated in the NBA. And wanting to keep it fun. And there's still a realness to the 35-year-old. We're in Boston, and Will Hardy is in the lobby with 5 guys. They all look similar aged. And it turns out that it's his Williams College basketball team that all come back to Boston or either live around Boston for the game, and he's hanging with them in the lobby. This is Will Hardy. This is symbolic of the Will Hardy who, when I asked him early in the year what he liked the least about head coaching, it was the time following the press conference to the game. The press conferences happen either 90 minutes or 105 minutes before tip-off. And his point was, I'm ready, and then there's nowhere for me to go. For my whole career, I've been working out players, being on the floor with people, being a part of the now I'm just stuck in the back room. And And he's like, I don't like it. Well, he actually very shortly after that stopped doing it. He actually started going out, and Will Hardy actually Darvin Ham did it last night too. So it's some of these newer coaches were now out on the floor interacting, communicating, not kind of sitting in the back room going after every last play whether they're prepared or not. So really an interesting I think it was actually a pretty good insight into who Will Hardy is as well in this story. That here he is, he's just coached an NBA game against the world champion Golden State Warriors. They've won. He's got a buddy who's a Warrior fan, and his reaction is still, he said a pretty good one. I know what he said because Will told us afterwards. At the guy, take it. Just kind of stick it. His joke is that if he'd done it as an assistant, no one would have noticed. But pretty fun, just a story to make you laugh. And maybe really, I think a good story on kind of who Will Hardy is. I have some more from the season that I could share, but I'm glad he shared that. And the reason I say I have some more is that there is a kind of a level in this business where I can't be sharing everything that ever happens around the group, or as much as you might like me to, or else I kind of become the narc, or I become they break their confidence. But there are just a lot of little moments which happened outside of the realm of natural reporting, if that's fair, in which I can attest that that's kind of who Will is. There's a fine line for me. I try to give you guys the best insight I can, but I also don't want the players and coaches to think oh, this guy who's traveling with us is always telling stories about us. And so therefore, they get, they get kind of held up on it. But when Walker and Lowry went to dinner in San Antonio and it was out there in public, I feel comfortable telling you that. Some of the, and I think I'll tell you, an example is that Lowry's got a great sense of humor and he's super funny. And there were 2 moments at shoot around in a particular Memphis this year where he busted the whole place up in laughter. I feel comfortable sharing that with you. It's very general, but I don't want, everyone to feel as though, so you got it. So there's some few more with Will where just his calmness, his fun, his reality, his truth to who he is, kind of his authenticity at 35 years old, still shows through. What a year. I want to actually do 2 things. I want to talk about Team 49, but I also want to take a moment and just tip a hat to our organization. There's a lot of different things here that I want to talk about. I just was super proud of being a part of the Jazz this year. And I have been, and we've evolved beautifully as an organization. I mentioned this on the air the other day, but even just the anthem singers. Our anthem singers have just had suddenly an incredible level of diversity to them every night. And I think it's super important. It's the first kind of action of the night. The fact that we now have a wide ranging of men, women, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ plus people doing that sends a message to fans that they're welcome. Our closest friends are a Peruvian black couple that came in town from Boston to come to a game and commented on to me how different and more welcoming the game felt to them than it had in years past, that there was a higher level of diversity in the crowd, that there was a different vibe and an energy in the building that they'd felt before, and that they felt more welcomed than they had in the past. Following that, I asked friends of mine who are black whether or not there were actually more people coming into the arena that were minorities, and they both said to me, 2 people I specifically asked, they both specifically said to me, yeah, it's way more welcoming than it's ever been before. The message has been sent that, and I don't think anyone ever intentionally sent the opposite message. But I do think that this organization now has intentionally sent the message that you are welcome, and I think it really, really matters. There's just a different energy and a different feel in the building this year, and I was super proud to be a part of it, and I thought it was wonderful. I also just want to give a tip of the hat to the Jazz organization. 251 sellouts. The All-Star weekend was amazing. The campaigns for the finisher, for the poster, and then for the sheriff, for the rookie. It was just a well done year. Even the logo, or the color change, I actually really kind of feel it now. I get it. I see someone in spotlight yellow sweatshirt and wonder if they're a Jazz fan. You see our logo and the note feels like it punches just as it is, just that the note is the important piece to it. It was weird at first, certainly, but I thought it was great. And I've said to you, I think the fans were amazing this year. That it was such a new team, new colors, new everything, and everyone embraced it. I thought it was really great. I want to touch on year one and Chris Dunn. What happened in Minnesota yesterday? And then we'll play our lottery. And then I'll lay out what we're doing for the week. We got a big week ahead of us. We're going to have big shows ahead of us. Also, that's the plan today. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. Saw Ben Murdoch at the game the other day with his kids. It was super awesome. The Chevy lineup of trucks, the Silverado and the Colorado, it's hard to be equaled. In fact, it can't be equaled. The Chevy truck is the best there is on the market. It's made better than anyone else. It brings more to the table. And the Colorado is the small, zippier one. The Silverado is what I call the lazy boy of trucks. You got all the power in the world. You're sitting on top of the world as the driving that thing, and it feels like you're sitting inside a lazy boy. The SUV lineup is just terrific with the Tahoe and the Suburban at the top of the battle. The Utah County assault vehicles riding all the way down to the tracks with the Blaze and the Trailblazer in the middle. If you're going to stop by Murdoch Chevy, please give me a buzz at dlock09@gmail.com. Let me set up a VIP meeting for you, and you can experience the 80-plus years of Murdoch service with the great Americana of the Chevy. It's a perfect match. It's in Woods Cross. It's in Logan, and it is the Murdoch Chevy, Woods Cross, and in Logan. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. 100% deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. What a fun way to make the playoffs even more fun with the daily fantasy game of Prize Picks for you. Check it out. As we mentioned, $100 back for you with the promo code Locked On with a $100 deposit match. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 6 players. If they go score more or less than the prize projections, you can win up to 25% of your money. No competing against others, so it's just projections that you're competing against. Prize Picks offers any sport you can imagine, and you can do your entries in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Safe and fast and easy withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. As I mentioned, first-time users, 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. And if you deposit $100, you get $100. If you deposit $50, you get $50. So don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match. It's Prize Picks, and the promo code is Locked On. Have fun. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Here's our plan for the week. So tomorrow, we'll really dive into what in the final 20 games of the year was real. I think you have to be really careful when you're playing short guys and things of what numbers are real, what numbers aren't, what we should be looking at, what we shouldn't. Wednesday, are we more likely to have 26, 36, or 46 wins this year? Thursday, I'm hoping to have Jazz assistant coach Brian Bailey on the show to talk about playoff preview, if that's possible. If that works out. I'd like to have him on I think he's really insightful and great, and he's done the scouting reports for a bunch of these teams. I think he'd give us a really good, for assuming we're all going to watch the playoffs. Friday, we'll do an Ask LOJ, getting ready for the offseason, looking at a bunch of things. Then we'll possibly starting to draft stuff the week after. And then just a heads up, as we get near the draft, I'm actually taking my daughter on her high school graduation present trip, which is awesome. We're going to the golf mecca of the world and playing. Unfortunately, it's right before the draft. So Leaf Tulane, who is been on the show a bunch of times and have locked an NBA big board, is going to take over the show. Might Wally Pitt me for all I know. All right, so I wanted to touch on team to year one. And I thought the tweet last night by Ryan Smith was really interesting. I mean, consistently, the comment is we're building a championship team in Utah. And that's a pretty audacious goal. And it's frankly not a goal that I think every team has if we're really honest about it. And I'll be totally honest. I think if I owned the Utah Jazz, I'm not sure it'd be my goal. I think if I was really honest, my goal, if I owned the Utah Jazz, would be to be highly entertaining from October 1st to May 1st and hope to get into the Final Four of my conference and see what happens. I wouldn't have had the guts to do the Rudy Gobert and the Donovan Mitchell deals that Danny Ainge did. It's hard. Trying to win is super, super hard. And being willing to pare down and then trying to win when you're winning at a pretty high rate is even harder. So I really do admire this. And what I admire most about this franchise this year from a front office standpoint is that they never bent on their intention. They were very clear from the very first day this was about building a championship. And then I think if they're honest, the team well outperformed what they anticipated early in the year, but they didn't get caught up in it. You know, Phoenix Suns a few years ago had this happen, and they got caught up in it. It ended up, Jeff Hornacek did an incredible job his first year, and then they were like, oh, we're in. And then when they got really in, what ended up happening was that they then kind of accelerated their route before they were ready to do it. And from that standpoint, when they suddenly weren't, they weren't ready for that stage of the process, then all of a sudden they got way out of whack. And 3-4 years later, they ended up having to go all the way back down to the bottom and win 23 games again. Everything that was done with the Jazz this year was intentional toward the future. And I truly admire that. I would have loved to call a playing game this week. I don't have any doubt that we could have made the play-in. I don't have any doubt. But it would have probably been at the expense of Ochai getting time, Lowry developing some things, of finding other guys, of knowing who Simone is. And those were items that were more important for the organization moving forward in this quest for a championship. And Ryan stuck right to it last night with his tweet. And I think that's really interesting to me. Now, I do not think this is a linear process necessarily. I don't think I read, I think it was Tony Jones who had, or maybe it was Andy Larson. One of them had a really interesting point, and it's a really interesting point. It's worth discussing this week and next week, that we've accelerated the timeline so much and have our two best players on such cheap contracts that it gives us this incredible opportunity and window to be really super aggressive, spend a bunch of money, fill those gaps while Walker and Lowry are still cheap, and do some things. It's an interesting angle. It's not the one that I'm anticipating, and it's not what I expect, but it is an interesting point of view. And even just talking briefly to Justin Zanuck last night at the bus after the game, I mean, that's a guy who is eagerly anticipating this offseason and all the things that they have garnered to be able to do deals and be creative and see what they can find. And to me, this year was year one of a process, and they stuck to it the entire time. And Team 49 was true to the very, very end. That's, to me, kind of what was most incredible about this, is that this group under Will Hardy's direction and who these players were. Last night, you have Colin Sexton and Lowry Markkanen and all these guys in their street clothes bumping off the bench every time a guy makes a play. And it was really, really awesome to see. And that energy is what I think we all felt this year. And I thought Sarah Todd's piece was interesting. The contrast of, here's Minnesota that just won and has the exact opposite going on because of Rudy's punch, was an interesting contrast to just kind of what we were a year ago, where just clearly the personalities were not vibing, and this group had it. This group had an energy and a fun to it. Will Hardy set the tone with fun is underrated. He made an interesting comment very early in the year. He was scared that these guys would all try to kill each other for minutes, and instead they came together with chips on their shoulder. Bowler was the first one who called it. The first day we met with everyone, Bowler was so excited because these guys all had such a chip on their shoulder. I didn't buy it for the slightest minute. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, come on, Craig, you really buying this stuff? Like, his media day talk. Nope. Craig was 100% right. And these guys came out all year long with that juice and that energy and that attitude. How Chris Dunn has transformed his game and why it might be real. Plus, we'll play our lottery and hopefully have time to talk about the disaster that happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota yesterday. Today's show is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. This game is so fun and probably what's going to keep me entertained for the entire offseason. It's cool. So if you ever thought you want to be an NBA GM, like I pretend to play one on the show every day, and it's not all that easy. It's the same thought you fantasize about managing your own basketball franchise. Download the Ultimate Pro Basketball GM right now. If you ever played EA Sports, but you just put it onto the the management mode, so the teams played and then you managed and what you did. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of the franchise, playing through seasons, leading your franchise to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you deal with challenging personalities. You deal with your center punching your point guard. You deal with hiring the right coaches and assistants. You deal with trading and trading players. You make draft picks. You navigate it all. It's all Pro Basketball GM. So right now, use the promo code LOCKEDON in the game store to get a 100% free boost to your franchise. ProBasketballGM.com. Scan the code that's on the YouTube or look it up in the App Store. That's ProBasketballGM.com. Start your dynasty today. Thanks so much again for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. If you want draft information, Locked On NBA Big Board is there for you all season long. It's a really good show. All right. Here's why I'm excited about Chris Dunn. We'll talk about this more, like what's real and what's not. But he's made it. We talked about this a little bit on Postcast. I have more time to do it now. So he's really transformed his game since being released by Chicago, playing a few games in Atlanta, played 18 games in the NBA last year, or in the last 2 years, and then his 22 games here with the Jazz. So he gets let go in 2019, 1920. If you look at those 4 years in the league with Chicago and with Minnesota. In Minnesota, his rookie year, he shoots 38%. In the next 3 years, he shoots 43%. So he's a combined about 42% shooter. And his three-point shooting is below 30%. It's bad. It's a bad combination. And here he is. He's got the God-given skills of being 6'5" and or 6'3" and 205 and super long and good defensive player. And he also had to play in Chicago with terrible coaching. So he goes to the G League, and you can see when he comes back and plays in Portland and Atlanta last year that his game's transformed a little bit. And here is a dramatic change with the Jazz. So it's where he takes his shots from. So in his first 4 years, he took somewhere between 24 and 40% of his shots at the rim, which is ideal, except for the fact that he wasn't a very good rim finisher. 51 his first year, 54 his second, 59 his second, and then 65. So it's heading in the right direction. It seems really encouraging. But the first 3 years are the sign that it's just not great. His three-point shooting's not super. And really what changed in his fourth year is that all of a sudden the percentage of his field goals are assisted. So his first year, 29% of his twos are assisted. Then it's down to 17%, which is much more likely as a point guard. Then all of a sudden it spikes to 42%. So he's shooting well at the rim and shooting more at the rim, but he's now back cutting, doing stuff like that. Everything's assisted. He's not creating for himself at all. If you go to his year here with the Jazz, he's back to that 16% of his field goals are assisted. 2 points are assisted. That's likely, okay? As a point guard, you're going to have to create your own opportunities. But what he did was he completely changed where he shot from. So instead of shooting what would seemingly be good, 26, 27, 28, 29% of your shots at the rim, he drops that to 14%. Regularly, I would say, oh, that's a big problem. But if you go back and look at his rim finishing, it wasn't very good. It was 54% kind of for those 3 years. He then suddenly is now, while shooting at the rim, far less than he did before at 77%. Crazy high. Why? Because I think he's picking his spots of when he can get to the rim, use that corkscrew layup, and when he can't. And what's changed is this little floater game. He showed signs of it in 14 games in Portland. He went from shooting, in his opening years in the league, he shot about 18% of his shots from 3 to 10 feet. Again, analytics would regularly say that that's good. However, when you're not finishing great at the rim, and maybe you're not seeing people because you're getting too deep, playing off 2 feet in the floater zone is not a bad choice, particularly if you do what he did this year, which is he made 52% of them, which seems high, but he really held that for 22 games, so let's give him credit for it. And he now took 58% of his shots in that range. He was at 41% in the 14 games for Portland. It feels like that's a little high, and we saw the Lakers change the way they defended him a little bit because they actually became aware of it. But if you suddenly take, okay, I'm going to take about 50% of my shots for inside the rim and three, I'm going to cut my rim shots down in half, which again feels like a bad thing, but I'm going to increase my percentage from 55% to 77%. And then I'm going to play from 3 to 10 feet with regularity. And instead of making those at 35, 36%, I've now got it down, because that's part of my game, to being a 50% floater shooter. That's a viable NBA offensive player. That makes him, and then his three still takes too long, isn't natural. But when you leave him zip code open, he's making it. He's making it from the top, zip code open, boom. And it gives him a chance to play. And so that transformation of his game, to me, is a sign that he has a chance. That this is not just late season false numbers. Then you add the fact that he's just a great rebounder, and he always has been. He's always been around 14, 15% defensive rebounding rate. He was at 17 this year for the Jazz. His assist rate is high because that's what he naturally does. And his turnover numbers were just way down this year. His usage was higher than it usually is, higher than you're ever going to really want it to be again. But there's just a lot of signs there that what we actually saw out of Chris Dunn is real. Now, tomorrow we're going to dig into what's real and what isn't. And one of the things we're really going to dig into is first quarter numbers from games in this final 20-game stretch, because so many of these numbers were late fourth quarter numbers when teams let go of the rope against the Jazz. And frankly, the game is built that you just score 96 points every night. And so I want to we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll look at that tomorrow. Wednesday, we'll do 26, 36, or 46. What is more likely? And then Thursday, hopefully have a playoff preview. Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves will play Minnesota. We want them to lose really, really badly. You know, I want to talk about Rudy because I think everyone's waiting to talk about it. I mean, it's stunning. It's awful. It's bad. I said this when Rudy dunked against us, and we lived it for all these years. He just can't get out of his own way. It's just too bad. He's a great guy. His intentions are great. He just cannot get out of his own way, and it's just too bad. I'll leave it at that. All right, let's play the lottery. Here we go. We start at 9. So our picks are 9. Right now our picks are 9, 16, and 28. 28 will hold. If Minnesota could possibly lose to the Lakers and lose to New Orleans or Oklahoma City, they'll get back in the lottery at 14. Or maybe 13, depending on who else doesn't make it. If Miami were to fall out, then they would go to 13, but likely 14. So our picks are likely 9, 16, and 28, which is actually the worst it's been in a while, which is a bummer. But so our chances of getting in the top 4 are 20%. We should get in the top 4 once a week when we do this, by the way, if the odds play out. And we have a 4.5 chance of making the number 1 pick. Here we go. Set, go. The number 1 pick of the NBA draft goes to the Charlotte Hornets. The number 2 pick goes to the Detroit Pistons. Number 3 goes to the Houston Rockets. The 4th pick goes to the Orlando Magic. The 5th pick, dropping 3 spots, is the San Antonio Spurs. 6th, Portland, dropping 6 spots. Washington, 7. Indiana, 8. Utah, 9. Dallas, 10. Their shenanigans keeps their pick. Oklahoma City, 11. Chicago 12 to Orlando, Toronto 13, New Orleans 14, Atlanta 15, and Utah with the 16th pick of the NBA draft, along with the 28th. All right, that is Locked on Jazz today. We'll be back with you tomorrow looking at what was real and what wasn't Wednesday. 26, 36, or 46 wins. What's most likely for the upcoming season? Thursday, hope to have a playoff preview for you, and Friday we'll do Ask LOJ. Thanks so much for being a part of Locked on Jazz. It's your team every day.